So, hey, Arjun.
Hi everyone. Hi Bijan. Hi Mustafa Bhai.
Hi, how are you?
Very well, thank you. Do we already have participants here with us?
Yeah, I think we can get started and people can keep joining in. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Happy to kick us off. Thank you both for firstly making the time. A very good afternoon and a warm welcome to this edition of the Bibridi peer-to-peer conversation series. I am Adrija Das. I am a manager in the Impact Intelligence and Education team at Roots of Impact and the lead of Bibridi. Bibridi, as many of you already know, is a program supported by the Embassy of Switzerland in Bangladesh and implemented by Roots of Impact and Light Castle partners. The program aims to help the growth and scale of impact enterprises in Bangladesh with the intention that then they are able to reach more base of the pyramid and vulnerable customer groups with essential products and services. So now, as the program aims to sort of support this growth and scale, we see that we don't just want growth and scale for the years to come, but rather for the decades to build institutions, or rather to support the building of institutions that can withstand many, many decades and can have a key role in the growth and development of Bangladesh itself. In this regard, corporate governance is a key issue, which is at the very heart of responsible growth. And it is not just about meeting regulatory requirements, but rather about creating processes, transparency, and accountability that can support companies to kind of, work towards this future of becoming an institution. To have that, today we will talk more in depth and provide insights about how companies can lay the groundwork and start responsible corporate governance as a startup. And therefore, we have two seminal experts from Bangladesh on this topic. While neither of you need an introduction, but just to share a welcome from my side, we have today Mustafizur Rahman Khan, who is partner at IDLC Venture Capital Fund 1. He's a seasoned entrepreneur himself and a venture capital partner with over 20 years of experience leading teams and building ecosystems across Asia. A very warm welcome from all of us, and thank you for making the time. We, of course, alongside have Bijan Islam, the CEO of Light Castle Partners and also a close partner with us in the program. He leads a leading management consulting firm in Bangladesh that blends deep local insights with world-class data-driven strategy. And of course, more importantly, he's been at the forefront of the development and growth of the startup ecosystem in Bangladesh. And key to the most people in this room, he's Bijan Bhai, a big mentor and guide to nearly all of you here. So therefore, without further ado, as I'm just as excited as the rest of us to hear the insights from the both of them, handing over to Bijan to lead the conversation for the day. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Arjun. Sorry, my daughter keeps wanting to join the Zoom call. Well, I'll just give her a minute to kind of go back. No, thank you, everyone, and warm welcome to everyone as well. I think this meeting is very, just gives me a
Well, those who are parents, we often face this. So, in the days of hybrid office, this is something that we expected. I think the most famous one is happened with the BBC presenter, something that we became an epic, I think, hybrid accident. And he became, I think, viral. So,
sorry about that. Some
no,
of the working from home.
I was just saying that there was, maybe Bijon will become viral like the BBC
Oh,
presenter.
yes, I remember that. Yeah. But yeah, warm welcome to everyone. I think this hosting MBHI is always very special because I don't know if a lot of you know that MBHI was our first investor at Light Castle. So I think he also has helped set up the governance structure at Light Castle as well. But I think he also, I think everyone knows he is a partner at IDLC VC, and I think has a wealth of experience, both banking and on the startup sector. And I've seen a lot of governance and everything as well. Simbai, why don't you start off this session, and I think by sharing, why do you think governance is critical for a company to start with? Because that is one of the first things we understand, that why we should think about governance. That's starting at the base. Yeah.
Okay, so I will go straight to why, and the why is giving a very immediate and practical reason that happened recently. About in August, I took over on one of our portfolio company, and basically kind of working as a de facto CEO, um, to make sure that the day-to-day operations and execution happen on time. And then the reason being is that even though we were partners, we're investors, we are getting um, the feedback on quarterly, but what in those quarterly updates, or which was not happen often regularly, but as we kind of wanted some of the numbers and so certain question was asked, we saw the there is a there was a common mistake, common absence of numbers, and that kind of impacted long term. We saw a lot of impact going on in terms of, especially on the finance side. So when I say governance from the any company, whether it's it's startup or a company, it doesn't matter, traditional company, the government is a very important factor, especially when it comes to finance, HR, because that two component has a huge impact, overall health of the company. And for us to kind of go in and kind of take the charge is basically stemming from the finance government side, which was not really managed properly, and the direct impact was tax violation, breaking compliance on the tax side. And this is the most common mistakes. Bijon can also confirm this, that the most common violation in Bangladesh is basically not able to kind of update tax, VAT, TDS, which has a long-term impact. Because when you are violating this, then even if you're raising money, that becomes a question mark, that if you can't manage this part, how would you manage investor money, right? So managing and compliance of from the government side is very important, and especially it's important when you are going from the seed to growth stage, where where you are approaching institutional investors whose compliance lens would be much more, I would say, strenuous than say an angel investor, who probably will not look at the governance structure as strongly as the institutional investors. And why? Because a lot of institutional investors are limited company, right? So by virtue of investing in your company, they get exposed of your violations and compliance break. So that's why this becomes very sensitive for institutional investors, or limited companies. Because, for example, I'll give another example. When we are running Gramin Fund Accelerator program, we were supposed to take 5% equity from the partner side, and 5% was supposed to be taken by Gramin Fund itself. And what happened was, over 3 years when we ran the program, Gramin Fund, even though they had the opportunity to kind of take the equity, but they end up, after 3 years, they end up not exercising the right to take equity in these companies. And one of the reasons was that compliance issue, because they didn't want a Gramin Phone limited company to expose for any kind of compliance that will come back to and haunt them, right? Because the telecom sector is a very sensitive sector. And even though they are not violation, but if they have a stake in another company, and if they're violating, that becomes their issue as well. So this is how governance becomes an issue, even though it may be a private issue. For example, if you are a founder, you may see that this is my issue or my headache, why somebody else is getting worried. But the point is, if the company is actually in taking equity, then through you they become exposed, and that's why the government has become an issue. So now So this is, the most practical example I've kind of used it, and 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 I think it can kind of set the tone why the governance is required. And a lot of times, from the founder side, if I uh, when the governance is seen, they probably see it as like whether external investor or external directors, uh, it may be seen as perceived as taking a control or taking as a much stronger voice in terms of managing the operation, but it is not the case. And I think it's a misrepresentation or misunderstanding of viewing governance as like controlling the company. It is never the issue. What governance bodies, what they do is like basically there to advise, guide, and help these founders to have a proper structure within the company, so that they are not breaking any laws. Ultimately, when you're non-compliant, you are inadvertently breaking local regulation or laws. That's something that has to be taken with a little bit of seriousness, because um, these are, because when you are a company, you are supposed to abide by certain regulation, whether it's labor law, right? It may be seen as not in a small issue, but if you look at the actual read through the labor laws of any country, these are very sensitive. Like for example, if you have a salary and if the salary has a certain salary structure, you are supposed to deduct advance income tax, right? And that is your responsibility as a company. And if you don't do that, then you are responsible, and the tax office will come to you. They will not going to come and talk to the employees. They were actually going to come and talk to you like, why didn't you deduct? And they will penalize you. So again, these are not small issues. It can be seen as like something, the compliance part, I can defer at the later stage. But I'm telling you, when you defer this, the small issues started piling up and become such a big problem, because every time you're non-compliant, there is a penalty clause, and these penalty are very, very, I would say, um, significant, and 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 it may make you actually bankrupt, because when they penalize you, they give you a certain deadline, and if you don't conform to those deadlines in terms of paying back the back penalties and whatever, basically they can come and basically stop your operation. So again, small things, um, simple things like HR can have an issue. um, uh, the finance and other part has, they have, if you're a limit company, you're supposed to file a VAT submission. Even if it's a zero nil return, you have to file it. So a lot of companies even don't even know that, because to fundraise, um, these founders, what they do is they create a limited company. But by nature of the limited company, you have to do some, monthly compliance submission with the VAT and tax office, and that is something probably it's not even informed by the founders, and they probably think about this maybe after 18 months or 16 months, they're realizing that this hadn't happened. And oftentimes, what happened was the founders don't invest in certain resources, because we understand that early stage you don't have a lot of resource to put in. So maybe you will not have a proper finance guy or proper HR guy. So a lot of these responsibilities falls into the founders. And what they end up is they would rather focus on operation issue or rather focus on the sales. But these components becomes, kind of a afterthought. But as the company grow, a lot of founders often make the mistakes of not putting HR or the proper finance person to make sure that the company is compliant, and again that becomes a problem. So if I have to kind of make the issue of why these are necessary, because of simple survival of the company, there is no um, small hacks. So if I now go to the third point, where uh, compliance is not about taking control. Compliance, it's about basically
And by just
make.
before going to the third point, I just wanted to,
Yeah.
because there are questions from the room as well. And I hear these practical solutions, and I think these are problems that we all have faced in the ecosystem. I think one of the first thing that comes from the founder community is that compliance is also very, very expensive, whether it's tax compliance, whether it's setting up proper HR, finance, right? How would you structure compliance setup as a company kind of starts and then gets institutional investment ready? How do they navigate this? And again, the cost benefit, how do they also manage their costs on this as well?
The what I did when I started, I use fractional services. I can afford a CFO, or I can afford a full-time finance guy, but there are services available, and even when now it's available, but when we started, it was not available. What we did was proactively went saying that, "Hi, can you give me this many hours? Just cover this, and we'll give you this amount of money." And a lot of these people, especially on the finance and HR side, they do side hustles. So it's not a strange request. It's a very common practices. So I would say, if you are financially resource constrained, then one of the things I would really recommend is do fractional, hires, both for HR and finance, and mostly for finance because it's a very common practice now.
I think
And
that's a great idea, doing fact. I remember when we all started, I think 4 or 5 companies, we came together and
yes,
hired one person because that
yes.
didn't exist. But I think nowadays we have a lot of these services. Like, I think we have DGempet here. We also have Turnkey who provides the services. But 7, 8 years back, this was a difficult service to kind of get, right? Yeah.
So in the age of tokenization, these are it's almost like a tokenization, right? You can't afford to pay the full price, but you take the fraction of the price and still get the benefit. So yeah, so these are easy kind of way to kind of go around.
And by coming to the issue of the control, I think I will also mix board here as well, right? Because a lot of the times when they set up a governance, you actually by regulations, I think if I'm not mistaken, you have to have board meetings every quarter, and then you have to have annual general meetings, right? Which early stage companies don't do that much, even later stage companies as well. But on the board side, I think one of the issues that you were mentioning is about this control issue, right? People are afraid of, we will get a board and then the control goes in, but they don't think about, okay, the founders actually have usually more board seats than the investors anyways, right? So in your experience, how would you advise founders to set up their board and also address the control issue as well? Yeah.
So on the board side, I would say one of my other postal company, they have a backlog of AGMs, and now they have to go to High Court to get this squashed. So again, this was not our business, but the thing is, and we didn't know that this was not done. And only after knowing, we have to get outside consultants, get a lawyer, and kind of make sure that that happens. But the point is simple: AGM, and that needs to be notified to RJC, and documentation to be properly updated. These are paperwork basically, but the fact that a lot of people don't know, that is, I think, is the biggest problem, that they don't even know what are the filings that they have to do, the minimum filing, whether it's the RGSC filing or tax filings or VAT filings. I think these are kind of ABC for any founders who is actually doing limited company. If they're a sole proprietorship, I'm not worried. But I'm saying, but when we are basically talking in this ecosystem, we are assuming that 99.99% are a limited company. So purely on virtue of that, these are basically just like they have to know sales, or they have to know, biz dev or tech. Even if they don't have to, but they have to be aware. But saying that I didn't know, I think it's a very unacceptable excuse in this day and age, and especially when you have chat GPT for everything, right? So I didn't know, I don't think it will cut these days. Going back to the board and control, again, it's a common perception of board equals to control. It is not the case, especially when you're on an early stage, and you don't have too many people on the board anyway, because you probably have one or two investors. So the control usually lies with founders, right? I would say 60 to 70%, or to some extent 80% control will be live, uh, because we have not actually given up equity. So early stage, I would say the board is not really an issue, but not having the board is it becomes an issue, because again, I didn't know, or the things that they're supposed to do, that didn't happen, and that creates a lot of problem later on. Because anybody, for example, when we go to the deal room, and if you and you look at all the documents, for example, if you're a limit company, in the first year we will ask for audited financial documents, right? If you don't have it, it's a red flag. Management audit will not have, it doesn't work for us. We will need an audit, and if you don't have an audit, that means we will know for sure that you probably has not done the check and balances for the company, and that is a red flag. And probably institutional investor not even talk to you, or say that, okay, we'll talk to you later, which is basically saying that, hey, we are not interested at this point. Usually when you want to get the first early stage, first outside board member, um, the advice is always, get someone who is from the similar industry background, and preferably has some understanding of what you're doing. Because one of the time, especially before, I don't think we had a lot of experts, but now, with after 10 years in the ecosystem, we have a lot of senior experts within the various category they are. Because usually when we saw people forming boards, a lot of times we saw that they got a very senior board member from traditional company, and they're so disjointed from what the actual company is doing, that their value addition was not almost next to zero, because the industry they may come from are so different. By the time we are dealing with, say, a modern technology company, that a lot of this, I would say, their advices doesn't work. But when you're talking about compliance, whether it's traditional or non-traditional, doesn't matter. This is common for everyone. So when I'm talking about strategic board advisor, first, usually I see that people usually try to get someone from the industry. So that is something that it's not related to the governance part. It's mostly trying to use the network or his experience or wisdom to kind of scale the company, right? So that doesn't have a lot of impact in the government side. It's more of a strategic impact. The government side happens especially on, say, if it's tax or legal. A lot of industry are sensitive. Like, so, for example, if you are especially when the companies were doing rideshare in the beginning, we didn't have a lot of legal kind of policies around it. So having a legal person on your board would make a lot of a sense, because you want probably someone to help you navigate this space where the policies are not there. So how do you govern a board depends on what is the immediate need for the company. A lot of people go for name brand, and I think those practices were very common about 5 or 6 years. They probably get a very senior person on a very popular face on the board, but it's almost like a namesake. It doesn't really add value, because most of the times I've seen that those members probably didn't attend the board meeting, and oftentimes are absent. So just having the name on the website doesn't really add, because what you need is someone who is going to help you, give you time. Because if you are asking somebody to be on your board, if they cannot commit time, then that's not an effective board member. So that's something that people have to kind of gauge. Like, do I bring someone who looks good on the pitch deck and has no value in terms of my government side, or do I want actually somebody kind of help me put a real contribution in the government side, depending on the need that I have? because oftentimes when you're selecting a board members, you have to first identify why am I getting an external, a board member to sit and help me, and oftentimes I don't think that internal discussion happens, or they really kind of gauge the need for it. So I think the beginning of the conversation has to be like, okay, if I'm structuring a board member, where is my greatest weakness? What is my greatest weakness? What is my weakest link? And how can I get an outside, member to kind of help me navigate that space? That should be the first question. The second would be, okay, beyond my weakness, okay, on my day-to-day operation or my health of my company, who can I kind of get as a, who can help me to be compliant? And oftentimes, I would say what I've seen from portfolio companies and beyond uh, the portfolio, within the ecosystem with pitching and basically, talking with people, 99% of the time, the fault is on the finance. So if somebody structuring their board, I would say my recommend will be to get someone who can help them to kind of structure or make people compliant, or help them be more informed about the finance part. Because most of the companies, for example, agrotech, um, a lot of things that are happening in the agrotech is gray area. um, you know, but hey, how do I make sure that I'm compliant with gray areas? You need someone expert to kind of talk about, kind of help you navigate those things. So these are the things that I would say that if it's about compliance, if it's about being, bring somebody outside, um, two two kinds. One is who will give you a strategic strength, uh, which has nothing to do with your operation. And then the other one, I would say, somebody who's helped you on the operation side, whether it's legal or HR or finance. I would say these are the two things I would, think about. And the last thing is like really discussing internally, like who do I, or what do I need, or why do I need help, and then kind of deciding what kind of board members I seek out to get on board. And one of the things I would say that just like you audit your investor, you should also kind of get sound bites like, okay, I'm thinking about this guy to bring on board as a board member. What do you think of him? Get that bounce off with people and see whether this person actually can give you time, or what has been his previous performance. So it's important that you also do that kind of background check, in terms of can he actually give you time, and be real value to you. And you don't need to kind of um, get a lot of members here. Usually board members, when I'm talking about external board members, are one or two people. Usually start with one, max two. But beyond that, I don't see too many people there who can give you value. And the other thing is, so when you are actually onboarding a board members, I've seen a practice like they give out equity, even if it's a small percentage, 1 or 2%. I think that's a very bad practice, to give someone, just to play a board member role to give equity out. It's not a good practice. There are a lot of board members, they actually ask for it or used to ask for it. I'm sure now these days they don't. So if you are, if you're getting somebody on board member, and I'm hoping that you are in a stage that you can afford a board member to be on, I would say pay for his time. If it's giving you, say, 1 hour in a month, agree a compensation, and this is like a token money, right? It's not something that really reimbursing is, but it's a gesture, and it kind of makes it almost like a, I'm respecting your time, and here's something. And that's why it kind of clears his expectation about, somebody asking for equity, and kind of, drawing in drawing him out from that conversation about, okay, I can become a board member, can you give me 1% equity on that? So clearly, having a line where you don't want to cross. So compensation side, I would advise that never do equity. It can be a small token of appreciation. Beyond that, it doesn't make sense.
No, thank you.
Um,
I think I completely agree on this point because I've seen this in Bangladesh a lot of times that advisory shares, right?
Yeah.
I have been asked to give an advisory in my companies. I have been asked to take advisory shares from a lot of companies as well, where I simply say, I don't have the time. I can't give you time. But I think it's a good way around, just pay them for the time. I think it's a lot easier than trying to do it. I know, Adrija, you possibly have a question. I will go to Adrija, but I'll also open up the room for Q&A as well. Adrija, what to you?
Thank you so much. That was like, yeah, deeply insightful and also so good to hear from both of your experiences. And my follow-up is more like on the point that I completely agree in terms of how you think about the independence of, let's say, a board member and how the whole intention is around them supporting the company more from a lens of being a good mentor or an advisor. But when it comes to, let's say, as you said, the operational aspects, you ideally want them to also be able to help you give some insights and kind of give that kind of guidance. Do you find in your experience that just like an hourly, like a token sort of a compensation, does that create enough of a skin in the game? And if yes, or what could be certain other ways of ensuring that the advisor has enough of a skin in the game while not giving up, let's say, equity for it?
I look, people who usually become a board member, it is not about the compensation. It is most of them that do it because it's kind of their way of giving it back. So and a lot of people I know that they do it professionally. I have seen platforms where actually they go and become board members. Like they actually, it's almost like a side hustle. So again, so if a board member becomes a transactional, I think I think that misses the point. I would say uh, as a founder, you really have to find the kind of people you want to be on the board, because who you have in the board is also giving a signal. You also have to kind of also understand that so you have to manage that narrative. Like if so, and we have refused uh, companies to, for example, the first talk when we went and saw who is in the cap table or who is there associated as a board member, we said, okay, this is company we don't want to be associated with, just because who they actually have on the board member, not even the cap table. So association matters. So if you can afford to have a board member, it makes sense to kind of go for those kind of people who can actually uh, help you, not because it is a transaction, because he is doing it because he wants to add value and see you prosper. And at least, for example, um, um, the types of engagement I have done personally, I'm talking myself, it was never about the transaction. It was always about, able to give it back from that point of view. Uh, like we have 3 partners in IDLC. We have 6 companies, and each of us, we are the board members for 2 companies each. So we are championing for 2 companies, each of us. And when we do go and have those conversations in a quarterly meeting, which we always kind of mandate that they must have a meeting with us. Even if the other board members doesn't want, we generally practice that. We always ask for an AGM because we know that these are things that they have to do, and kind of make them like a standard practice. And what we do in those meetings, in the quarterly meetings, is that we challenge them. Challenge them not necessarily because we it's in our nature, but because we want to see them improve. And what happened was, when they actually come for these meetings, they actually get prepared because they expect the board to challenge them. So and by virtue of that, they become better in terms of being accountable. So the board members, what they actually help these founders is to become accountable for themselves in a way. So I think, so this is, I would say, the role of a board member who actually sitting there not just observing, but also kind of voicing whether it's concern or encouragement or guidance. I think that's the primary role for any board member. There's a lot of members who just attend and absolutely have no question for the founders. I find it very appalling, because if you are attending and not have an opinion, that means you are least interested in the company's operation, business, and you have nothing to add. And I think uh, that kind of, at least in the early stage, those value addition is really important. Maybe when you're a limit company and attending a AGM doesn't really matter, because you're a 500 company, right? Nobody, people can ask questions and CEO can answer, but doesn't really matter. But when you are, 100,000 revenue or 500,000 revenue, I think being challenged is a good practice to have through your board member.
Thank you so much. That was very insightful, and I'm sure there are many founders in the room who would love to, yeah, have this kind of support from the board members going forward. Thank you so much.
No, thank you, Rija, for the question. Thank you, Emma, as well. I keep having flashbacks when we used to have board meetings. Remember Emma early on the days, and then Emma suddenly asked me in one, so we are having this board meeting, we're sitting together, and Emma suddenly asked me, Bijon, what type of car is Light Castle, right? I was like, what do you mean car? And I said, look, are you a Tesla or you are a BMW? What type of car do you want to build, right? So that, was in my head. And I think use that anchor to kind of position Light Castle. Okay, what kind of positioning Light Castle should be in our client's mind, right? Is it like very like Tesla, or is it like more prestige like say Mercedes, right? So always a pleasure to have Emba in meetings. I know that we have around 15-20 minutes more to go. I do want to open up the room for questions. So any questions that anyone in the room has, feel free to raise your hand and ask. You can also use the chat window as well. Yeah.
I have, before I ask a question, one advice.
Yeah.
Oftentimes I've seen you people in Bangladesh, especially, I've seen, I think the practice has reduced a lot, but in early stages, I used to see you probably have your family members on the board member or friends. And but often case it was a family member, and oftentimes it could be father, mother, even wives. That is a huge red flag. So I think that practice has kind of reduced, but never had that kind of structure where you are having someone as a board member who has no value in the company other than being a family member or a friend.
So thank
Sorry,
you.
go ahead.
I just want to add that. So we have never required bank loans, but we did want to have the facility, right? In case we ran out of working capital. I mean, it's always good to have an overdraft facility, right? So we went to our bank, and when they were doing our diligence, they said, "Why don't you have your wives as board members?" I said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Yeah, both of your, yours and Zahed's wives works in multinational companies. Have them as board members. It's easier for us to give you loans." I said, all right, but I'm not going to do that because they have nothing to do with the company. But that reminds me, in Bangladesh, that's kind of like a trend. Emma, we have the first question from Mahira from, I think it's from the chat window. I'm going to read it out. You can also take a look as well. So this is Mahira, founder of Alight in Zen. It's a mental health tech. His question is that for early stage startups in Bangladesh, how should founders balance the setup, compliance, and marketing cost while looking for pre-seed investors, focusing on revenue, and when foreign investors also want local validation? So what is the best approach to attract both local and international investment? Yeah. A lot of questions, but yeah.
A lot of questions, okay? It's not a single question. So look, if you're early stage, what is your main problem? Your main problem is getting customers or not having enough customers or not having sales, right? So at that stage, you just have to make sure that you address that, and no board members can help you with that, frankly speaking. In early stage, and the compliance, as I said, is less of a issue, because people will kind of not make you pay for it, in a sense, like the investor, the angel investor will overlook your misstep, because they understand this happens. So from where you are, the main issue is your sales. The main issue is cost of acquisition, your customer, and your main issue is talent, hiring or managing talent. These are basically your three issues. And if you can manage this, at least in the early stage, then you can think about the bigger problem. But there's no point of thinking about bigger problems at this stage. Fix your sales or sales funnel, get your marketing costs right. At least you should know what should be your standard marketing acquisition rate, because a lot of people don't even have clue that whether they're actually overspending in the marketing cost to hiring a customer, right? So get your acquisition cost right. And third is, try to get the talent, because without talent, you will not survive.
Thank you, Ambhai. I think it is tricky, but at the end of the day, you have to stagger it out, like you said, right? Anything else from the room? Again, raise your hand or feel free to put it on the chat window. We're both open. Yeah. Ambhai, we did receive some questions also online when we kind of promoted the event as well. I think this one is very interesting. What are say 2 red flags, right? That whenever you see in a company, you're never going to invest, right? When you're doing your due diligence.
What are the 2 red flags?
Yeah.
I would say the first one would be when you have, like, usually we have seen that if the founders doesn't necessarily come with some domain expertise, the cost of learning the business is very high. So for us, it's not a red flag per se, but it gives us kind of a pause in terms of, should we really invest in this? Because without the domain expertise, the founders are bound to make too many mistakes in early, where it will cost to the business. So that would be one, but I would say I would not consider it as a red flag. But if you talk about really big red flag, it is debt on the book, because usually when you are in an early stage, you should not be having debt on the book. You should be raising money through equity. But I've seen in our cases 1 or 2 companies, fairly known companies, who had debt, and that became an issue for us not to pursue, because debt becomes a more senior, I would say, instrument when it comes to equity. So we become a secondary, like, if in terms of liquidation, the debt will get a preference over equity holder. So that would be one red flag that we would definitely say no to a deal.
I think it's also important to understand, like you mentioned, if a company has a debt and you become an investor, it also hits your CIB, right? So recently we were talking with a big company, everything went well, but there has an investor whose CIB was hit because the investor invests in companies that has not paid back their loans in time. And these are all linked. Now, the investor is very reputed. It's an international institutional investor, but they have invested in companies who have not paid their loans. So now the investor's CIB is, red mark. And now the new company where the investors invested cannot take any more loans because one of the directors doesn't work. So it's all interlinked. And so I think, managing debt is very, very critical because, it hits your CIB as well. And that means you cannot get a credit card. So Mbhai, one of his portfolio company, messes up, Mbhai's credit card is blocked. So
and that's one of the reasons I'm saying that Gramphone didn't take equity, because for them the exposure was way too much, versus trying to get some upside. So yeah, absolutely. I think there's another question in the message.
So this is Arafat from Upon. I think we all know Upon Bazaar, which provides convenience stores within factories to RMG workers at lower cost. I saw many impact founders fear losing mission control over bringing in strategic investors. What governance safeguards can help preserve purpose while giving investors meaningful oversight? Very interesting question. There can be mission drifts. How do you keep that through governance?
I know. I mean, for impact, I think it's a very purpose-driven company, right? And I think one of the things that anybody who actually thinking about, especially for impact investment type of startups, uh, if you're doing a due diligence, I think it has to be very robust. So, and having a very candid conversation about what are you expecting and having a long-term, vision for the company, and also have very, candid questions from the investor or whoever board member about what is their vision as well. And if you and through that, basically what we want to find out whether your visions are aligned, whether your missions are aligned, uh, because if that is a problem in the long run, then it's not going to be a good marriage. And ultimately, whether you talk about investors or board members, not so much for board members, but especially for investors, I would say you have to see them as a marriage. And and these investors, if they are not um, the right kind of investor for you, uh, it's going to be turning into a very bad marriage. And divorce, as we know, it's a very painful experience. Reputational risk comes in. Uh, it's a small ecosystem. All kind of hazards comes in. So I would say uh, make sure that you're aligned. And once it happens, and once you have a bad actor or whatever bad misalignment, very hard to kind of walk back through the decision that you make. So I said, hey, do your due diligence, do some background check, make the process longer so that you guys are all aligned, so that you don't have to have the conversation after 2 years or 3 years down the line.
So thank you. But I think a very important point, treat it like a marriage, because if you have 60 years in your career, a company possibly would take between 10 to 20 years, right? So that's like between 20 to 30%. That's huge, right? So you would be spending 20 to 30% of your active career with these investors as board members, as colleagues, right? And if the vision alignment isn't there, it gets tough. I think one of the solutions to this is also have frequent every quarterly board meetings, because that also allows you to be on the same page. Now if you're meeting once a year, it's going to be tough to keep everyone on the same mission and the vision, right? But if you're meeting quarterly board meetings, everyone gets updates, they can give input, so it's a lot more easier, right? I think Jordan has also posted templates on impact and ESG clauses. Please take a look at that as well. Any other questions from the room? I think we have time for one more question. Again, feel free to raise your hand or put it on the chat, whichever is kind of comfortable for everyone. If not, Emma, I really want to thank you for this session. I know you were very, very busy. I really appreciate taking this time, and I think always giving us time on this very, very critical topic. Always a pleasure hosting you. Adrija, over to you to kind of any closing thoughts, and then to Emma.
Thank you so much, both of you, Mustafa Sir Bhai and also Bijan, of course. Maybe just a recap of some of the key ideas that the two of you shared, just for the rest of the room to also take away and implement in their experience. So most importantly, I found it very interesting that you touched upon the why of corporate governance, that even thinking short term, if companies are looking to go to an institutional investor, there are huge needs around making sure that all of your income tax compliance, all your financial compliances are in place, and ideally also all labor and HR related compliances. Now, coming to making it easier and cheaper, very insightful here as well. That, of course, look at getting services, even if you can't hire someone full time, look at getting services on a part time basis from experts, including so many experts also in this room, who can give the required support around these compliances. And lastly, a key part of the conversation, we spoke a lot about board governance and how board members can play two very important roles. One could be around being sort of like a sectoral expert who can give strategic guidance on navigating different aspects of growing the business. But on the other hand, you can also have certain operational experts who have the required know-how on legal compliance, on financial aspects, who can help you meet those requirements when it comes to, yeah, just making sure that you have all the basics in place. Focusing on your weakest link as a company and then trying to strengthen it with the right kind of advisory, of course, would be a key strategy in this regard. So once again, thank you from all of us, both to Mustafa Bhai and also Bijon for this conversation today. The insights were deeply meaningful, and we look forward to more such conversations. Thanks.
Thank you, Adrija. Thank you, Mbhai, once again. Thank you, everyone, for joining and contributing. Till next time.
Thank you, guys. Have a great day. Bye.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.